2 years ago, I went camping with my girlfriend. We had planned to go to this lake that was not really that far away. Surrounding the lake was a large amount of woods and trails and some good places to camp. It was not an actual campground, but it was way out in the wilderness, and there was lots of places to camp out there. We had gone there once before, and it had went well that time. So, we arrived at the lake and walked around with our backpacks looking for a good camping spot. We ended up going way off the trails and deep into the woods. We were way out in the wilderness, and we saw no one else the entire time that we were there. It was not a popular lake for hiking or picnics or whatever. This was a very quiet area, and that's the reason that we thought it would be great for camping. When we got to a little clearing deep in the woods, we set up camp. There wasn't much, but I had carried a small tent with me in my backpack. We had a little food and some other basic supplies. We then set the tent up and hung out for a little outside before going to bed. After we got into the tent and into our sleeping bags, we fell asleep rather quickly. I think we were tired from the long day of walking and being outdoors. I always sleep better when I'm outside all day. We also had a decent amount of experience camping and stuff, so it was never too hard to fall asleep. However, we were both woken up in the middle of the night. I just remember that it was completely pitch dark and I heard a noise outside the tent. Then I heard my girlfriend wake up and whisper to me asking what the noise was. To me, I figured that it was probably an animal. It sounded like it was just inside of the woods off the clearing. The sound was of leaves crunching, tree branches moving, and the ground being disturbed from somebody walking on it. But I quickly realized that the only animal this could be was a bear. It was far too large to be a deer or anything else, and we were not in moose country. This was known to be an area with bears. If not that, the only other explanation was that it was a human. But in my mind, it was more logical to be a bear than a human. Because like I mentioned before, we were way out there in the middle of the wilderness, not even remotely close to an area where people were. We were a good 30-minute hike off the path in this quiet park. The chances of somebody else being all the way out here was extremely slim in my mind. So I stayed lying there listening to the sounds. I couldn't quite tell what it was. The footsteps sort of got closer, and I reached under my pillow for the bear spray. But it was then that I started to think that this didn't quite sound like a bear. It really sounded more like a human. I wasn't quite certain though. Whoever or whatever it was walked a short ways towards our camp in the clearing. Then they stopped. We heard nothing for a good 30 seconds, but that silence was broken with this really creepy laughing sound. It was one of the creepiest sounds I've ever heard in my life. The laughing was of a man, seemingly insane, or else trying to sound insane. It wasn't funny, but just downright creepy. The laughter went on for about 10 seconds and then stopped. Then we heard the person walking away. He went back into the woods, but the footsteps stopped again. My girlfriend and I were thoroughly spooked. After a couple of minutes, I decided to go out and look around. I was hoping that he was gone, and we hadn't heard the guy in a while. I took a flashlight and left the tent. As I walked around the clearing in the woods, everything seemed fine. I started looking off into the woods a little bit. When I looked around, at first I saw nothing. Then I noticed something. A little ways into the woods between some trees, I saw a man. It was a tall but thin guy, and he had a beard and kind of long hair. He was staring right at me with a creepy grin. But far more creepier than that, he had really wide eyes. It was so creepy that I quickly shined the flashlight away from there. I went over to the tent and told my girlfriend that we were leaving now. We hurriedly folded up the small tent, packed up, and then left. The whole time that we were doing so, I was listening for the guy. Thankfully, I didn't hear him. We then left through the woods on the other side from where I had seen the man. We basically jogged most of the way, or else walked really fast. Eventually, we made it back to the trail. Then we got back in the car and went home. We didn't see or hear the guy for the rest of the time that we were out there. A few months ago, I went on a camping trip with my wife. We got up really early to go up north to a campsite that we had been to before. After packing up the truck, we hit the road by 5 a.m. It was still completely dark out, and the roads were very quiet, Nobody else was out. Most of the way to get up there to the campsite was country roads anyways. We were looking forward to this camping trip and would be spending it at a state forest. As we got closer to the forest, I remember noticing a truck pull onto the road behind us. It was obvious because it was dark out, so I saw the headlights. Plus, nobody else had been out on the road. I thought nothing of it, obviously, but the longer we drove, the truck remained right behind us the whole time. It was really the following distance that made me suspicious, though. I was going a little over the speed limit. Nothing egregious, but the truck was pretty much right behind me and not the normal following distance. When we turned, the truck did as well. Then we went straight and the truck went straight. It was behind us for a good 20 minutes and no other cars were behind us at all. I asked my wife if she thought that the truck was following me. She said that it was probably just an impatient guy also going to the state forest. That was a good possibility. For some reason, though, I just had the feeling that was not the case. I'm normally not a paranoid person at all. Before we got to the park, though, I decided to test it out. I turned too soon at a random road. The truck behind me did as well. I looped around and went back to the road, making a pointless circle. The truck did the exact same thing. Now we knew that he was following us for some reason. We both didn't know who it was, and it was too dark to see the driver. We found a quiet spot, not near anybody else really, and set up our tent there. The area we were camping in was near some large pine trees. Much farther down were a few cabins and RVs, but where we were some places for tents, and it was sort of off a path not too far away from the entrance to the park. I started a small campfire, and we roasted some marshmallows and enjoyed the evening. As it got to be sort of late, we were planning on heading to bed shortly, but it was also at that point that I heard a sound. It was very quiet with just the sounds of nature until I heard a car engine. I realized that a car was driving not far away. Then I saw it. A truck, the same truck before that, was following us. It was driving on a really wide path that led to the campsite through the trees, and it was driving rather fast. The truck approached our area and then took a right. It went off the path and was now heading straight towards us. My wife and I scrambled to get up when we saw this. My wife ran for the tree line and I followed. Thankfully, we made it into the woods with a few seconds to spare. If the truck would drive straight for us, it would hit the trees before, and we would be safe. The truck drove right into our camp, just missed our campfire, and ran over a chair. Then it jerked back onto the path, turned around, and sped away. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. It actually took me a few minutes to connect it to the truck from earlier, because that had been over 12 hours prior. My wife was the one who remembered, and I realized it was definitely the same truck as before. We called the park rangers and reported what happened. They said they had just received another report of a vehicle speeding on paths and were investigating. The park got locked down for a short time until we were told that the truck was off the property and it was safe again. I think the guy must have been caught, and we went on with our camping trip. When we got back, I tried to look it up online, but couldn't find anything. So I'm not entirely sure if the guy was caught or found, or if it just didn't make the news. But I don't think anybody there knew that it was the same guy who followed me in the morning. I mean, how would they? But who would do something like that? Was he a guy just looking for trouble and wanted to follow people to harm them or something? I have no idea, but my wife and I haven't been back to that park since. We will definitely go back sometime, but I will never forget that crazy experience. One time I went camping alone, deep in the woods. I enjoy camping and have gone many times before. I really like being outdoors and in nature. I would not call myself a complete outdoorsman, but I enjoy the challenge of getting through a few nights in the wilderness. Every time I go, I bring my own food though, so I'm not hunting off the land or eating random berries. But I will start a campfire with just sticks and rocks, and I like to make my own little shelter and sleep in it, things like that. So anyways, I live a little bit out there in the country. I grew up out here, and I've always liked it. We're hours away from the nearest big city, and there are not too many people in these neck of the woods. I know many great camping spots, not common campgrounds, but places where you can be totally alone in the wilderness. One time I was going up for a weekend to challenge myself a bit. There was a spot my buddy told me about that was a little over an hour away. He had camped there once before and said it was the most intense camping experience he's had. The reason for that was because it was so far out from civilization and there were very dense woods. The terrain was tough, and because of this, there was lots of wildlife. He said he saw tons of animals from deer to fox and coyotes, and even saw a bear when he went. He also told me that that was the only time he felt kind of creeped out when camping. I was slightly intimidated, but overall excited for the challenge. So I packed up my stuff and drove out there for the weekend. When I arrived, I could see that it was in fact very isolated. There were so many trees and hills for miles and miles. I left my truck and headed out onto the land. I knew that there was no other humans around for many square miles. I also had no cell signal at all, which was not a surprise to me. I walked for a long time, but had memorized the way that I went so that I would be able to get back. After walking for about an hour, I found a nice spot in the woods that I wanted to camp at. It was a cool little clearing that had a good view of the surrounding area. I dropped some stuff off there and then walked around looking for wood to make a fire. I found some, dropped it back off at my camp, and then walked around for a while exploring. I saw a few animals, mostly deer, but also saw a fox. When I got back, I started a small fire, cooked some food, and ate in the wilderness. The food you cook out there always seems to taste better to me because of how hungry I am. Not long after this, it got dark, and I made a small shelter out of sticks and mud. The shelter was actually pretty legit, as it had a roof and a wall, and I made a door out of this large tree. It wasn't too fancy and was not large enough to stand up in or anything, but you could sit up and lay down. It would protect me in case it rained, and it took me like 3 hours to build. And I wish I took a picture, but I forgot. Anyways, I went to sleep in my little shelter and called it a night. The next morning I woke up at around dawn. The sun was just coming up and I left my shelter. When I did, I immediately saw something on the ground right outside of it. At first, it looked like small white pieces of paper, but then I realized that they were pictures that were all face down. I turned them over to see that they were photographs, and they were all photographs of me. It was me the previous day walking through the woods. Most of them were taken from behind me and a good distance back. A few of them looked like the camera was pretty far zoomed in. Who had taken these pictures, though? I had not seen or heard anyone. Whoever it was must really be an expert in being stealth. I looked around there but saw no one. I was so freaked out and I just wanted to get out of there. I frantically packed up my stuff and literally jogged the rest of the way back to my car. I got inside and then drove the whole way back home. I called my buddy and told him all about it. Now, I know that some people might think that this was my buddy pranking me. After all, he had been there before and did tell me about it. But I know that it wasn't him because he actually wanted to go with me originally, but could not because he had to go to a wedding with his wife that weekend. When I told him about it, he seemed genuinely interested, and he just isn't a huge prank type of guy. This remains my scariest experience that I've ever had while camping. I still go camping quite often, and nothing even remotely close to something this weird has happened since. This is something that happened last fall. I went camping with my best friend Erica to a campsite that was about an hour away. There was a lake there, and it was a very nice place to fish, camp, or hike. Mostly we were interested in hiking on the many scenic trails that the park had to offer. We drove up there and after arriving, hiked quite a bit the first day. I got over 20,000 steps, and Erica got around the same. We saw a few other people out on the trails, but not too many. Then we went to the campground, which was pretty quiet, and set up our tent there. We had thought about renting a cabin, but just bringing a tent was cheaper. Looking back, I wish we had got the cabin. So anyways, we set up the tent and were hanging out around it when it got dark out. It was then that this random guy seemingly wandered over to us. He walked right up and asked us if we were camping there. It was pretty obvious that we were, and we said yes. This guy was maybe 5'8", looked to be in his 30s or 40s, and had a somewhat rough look to him. Although he had a build that was almost like a rugby player. However, something seemed off about him right away. I thought that most likely he was just drunk. He started asking us a bunch of questions like if us two girls were camping alone or if anyone else was with us, and if we had gone camping before. Questions that seemed a little bit strange, but could have just been his curiosity in a drunk state. But the longer we talked, the less he seemed drunk to me, and more just weird. I recently graduated from college, so I know how drunk people are. Perhaps this guy was on drugs or else just really strange. When he wasn't talking, he just stood around kind of looking around. There were several times that we kind of hinted that he should leave. Like we said, have a good night, but he just stayed there and then asked us more questions. He was asking if we knew how to start a fire, if we needed help with anything, and how long we were planning on staying. We asked him where he was staying, and he just pointed in a random direction and said, "A ways off." I asked him who he was camping with, and he said, "Oh, I'm just kind of here by myself right now." We told him that we were tired, and after a while, he finally walked off and left. To be quite frank, I was not feeling the safest going to sleep in a measly tent now. But Erica and I were already here and figured the guy was maybe just high on something but harmless. Hopefully he'd go back to his camp wherever it was and go to sleep. We stayed up for like another hour, and the guy didn't come back in that time. So at that point, we were really tired and figured that we were good to go to bed for the night. So we got into our tent and then into our sleeping bags. After getting in the tent, I realized that I was stupid for not bringing any kind of protection. We had no guns, knives, pepper spray, or anything like that. The closest thing to a weapon that we had was a really heavy flashlight that my dad gave me. It was not that big, but like super heavy. We turned out the lights, and I don't know how quickly Erica fell asleep, but it took me a while to. I was feeling kind of paranoid. I heard all the noises surrounding our camp. Most of them were things like the wind or possibly a squirrel in the woods nearby. But after a long time of lying awake and trying to go to sleep, I heard another noise. It was the sound of footsteps, and there was no mistaking it. I hoped it to be a random person just walking by, but then I heard them moving closer to us. The footsteps approached our tent, and as they got closer, I got more and more nervous. I whispered to Erica, asking if she was awake, but she was not because she didn't answer me. I could only sort of see a shadow through the tent of whoever was approaching. Then the person stood outside of our tent. The next thing I knew, the zipper, which coincidentally was next to me, started moving. The tent door opened, and I saw a man there. It was the same guy from earlier. I reached for the flashlight and grabbed it. Within probably 2 seconds of the guy unzipping the tent, he started to lean his head inside, and as he was looking in, I took a swing at him with the flashlight. I hit him right in the face, and he yelled and moved back. Then he lunged forward as if to fight me. With all my strength, I swung it at him again, hitting him in the head once more. He yelled again, and this time moved back and ran off. By now, Erica woke up from the commotion. I told her to call the police, and I emerged from the tent to see the guy running off. He went out of sight, and Erica called the cops and told them about what was going on. We then went up to the campsite's main welcome building. When the police got there, they found the man in the woods. He was complaining that I hit him, but what was I supposed to do? In the end, the man left with the police. I'm not sure if he got arrested or banned from the park or what. I didn't get in any trouble for hitting him, thankfully, as he was breaking and entering into our tent, but we left that night and went back home. This happened when I was on a family camping trip as a kid. It's something that I will never forget, and it took place when I was 8 years old. It was my parents, my older sister, and me going camping. We drove for a long time up north to a campsite. I'm not even sure exactly where it was. When we arrived, there were a few other people there, and we found a spot on the campgrounds to set up our tent. I remember that we first went walking around the park a little. When we got back, it was time to set up the tent. We had a pretty large tent, with there being 4 of us. I just remember that my parents were struggling to set it up. There were stakes and poles everywhere, and it was frustrating to watch. I wanted no part in helping them, so I wandered off a little. I went down this random path nearby, just walking around. However, I ended up getting myself lost. I just remember trying to find my way back, and I realized that I didn't know where I was. I didn't even really wander off that far, but somehow I had taken a wrong turn or something. So as I was walking, trying to make my way back, I saw this woman. She came walking from the opposite way. When she saw me, she asked me where I was going, and I told her that I was trying to get back to camp where my parents were. I remember the lady then said, "Follow me." I felt better thinking that she would lead me right back to them. She turned and started walking the other way, and I followed. As we walked, the lady did not say anything. Then she did something unexpected. She turned to the left and went off the path and into the woods. I was confused because I knew that I had not gone off the path at all. I reluctantly followed her, and for some reason, I didn't ask her why we were leaving the path. And these woods were thick. It was not like we were just walking between some trees. We were getting hit with branches left and right. We walked through the thick woods for like 5 minutes. I was so confused as to where we were going. Eventually, I stopped following her. I froze where I was when it got super thick and the ground got kind of wet and spongy. I realized that there was no way we were heading in the right direction anymore. But the lady didn't stop. She just kept on walking through the near water in this dense forest. I turned around and walked the opposite way. I kept going in the same direction until I reached the path again. The lady never turned around or asked me why I stopped following her. She just kept going. When I got back to the path, I just kept walking on it until I somehow found the camp again, maybe 10 minutes later. I was so relieved to be back, but I was also very confused by that lady. Where was she going? It kind of creeps me out to look back on it. I mean, she didn't say anything, and she just started walking through this really thick and dense woods, even with water on the ground. The behavior was very odd, but I'm glad that I made it back to camp. Okay, I didn't see her again for the rest of the weekend, but I still wonder about it sometimes. This happened over the summer a couple of years ago. It wasn't the scariest thing ever, but at the time, it really messed with me. I was 14 and didn't know how to handle that kind of anxiety. Anyways, here's what happened. My family decided to go on this camping event that we hadn't been to in a few years. It wasn't deep woods camping or anything, just a regular site where you can pull your car right up to your spot. Kind of like a little campground with bathrooms and picnic tables. Nothing fancy. We got there in the afternoon and set up 2 tents. One was for me and the other was for my dad, his girlfriend, and my 2 younger siblings. Everything was normal that first night. It was hot but quiet. People a few campsites down had a fire going, laughing and talking, but nothing that kept us up. The second night, everything changed. Around 3:30 in the morning, I woke up to a voice. At first, I thought it was part of a dream because it was soft and far away, but then it kept going, saying just one word, "Hello," repeatedly. It got closer and louder. I was still half asleep, so I didn't move at first. My dad's tent was maybe 10 feet away. The woman kept saying hello like she was looking for someone. She sounded confused or maybe drunk. Eventually, she started saying that she needed gas and a jump for her car. My stepmom yelled out something like, "It's 4 in the morning. Get out of here. Call a tow truck." That's when the woman changed. She got louder and then started yelling at my dad's girlfriend to get out of the tent. I wanted to step out, but I wasn't wearing a shirt. The sleeping bag I had was made for cold weather, and it had been too hot to sleep in anything else. I just laid there listening. I could hear her feet crunching on the gravel. She got right up to their tent and started yelling again. Her words didn't even make sense anymore, and she began to hit the tent, just full-on slapped it hard. I could hear my little brother starting to cry inside. My dad yelled at her to back off, and she just kept mumbling and swearing. At one point, she started pacing around like she couldn't decide what to do. She then shouted that she'd be back, and she left. That was it. She just walked off into the dark. I couldn't see where she went. I stayed awake for the rest of the night. I held my phone against my chest the whole time, going over every bad scenario in my head. She never came back. In the morning, we didn't see any sign of her. No car pulled over, no broken down vehicle, nothing. We asked around a bit, but nobody else had seen her. We ended up packing up early and heading home that afternoon. Looking back, maybe it wasn't some horror movie situation, but at the time, I had no idea what she was going to do next. Being out there in the dark with only thin tent walls between you and someone like that, it felt like anything could happen. I was out camping in the mountains when I was about 11 years old. It was this small open area in a deep forest surrounded by trees. It was a family trip that included my sister, parents, grandparents, cousins, and a few friends and their parents. So it was 2 tents and 1 RV. My family slept in one tent that had a side connected to the tent my dog slept in, with a toilet tent nearby. My friends and their parents had a tent behind ours, while my grandparents and cousins slept in the RV. There were 12 of us in total, including me. It was a large campsite, so there was a lot of distance between us, and my family was closest to the woods. Not so close that we could see into it, but close enough that we could see about 5 feet past the tree line. It was a 2E trip, and we had 5 days left before going home. It was about 3 a.m. and I was still awake. I had forgotten my insomnia medicine at home and had slept until 2 that afternoon. I had to use the bathroom, but was too scared to go out alone, so I woke my dad up. He didn't want to leave the tent, but promised to watch from the windows until I came back inside. So I grabbed a lamp and went outside to the toilet tent. Once inside, I closed myself in and turned off my lamp. It was a habit I have, so the bugs weren't attracted to the lamp inside the tent, and so that nobody could see me in there. It wasn't even a minute later, the dogs who were in the tent next to the bathroom started barking and growling like nuts. Now, these 2 never barked or growled except when somebody came too close to the tent, or that one time that geese were passing between the tents and it scared them. It was late and I could hear no one outside. My dad started yelling for them to shut up, but they just got louder and our golden retriever started to bark this scary bark. Our other dog was growling like he was about to attack something. It was scary to hear. I was scared but wanted to know if there was something outside that I needed to yell for my dad about. So, I opened the entrance to the bathroom tent just slightly to see what was out there. I looked straight out into the woods, trying to see if it was another animal, but couldn't see anything. But then to the left, where I was looking, something moved behind the trees. Once my eyes focused on it, I could see this large figure much bigger than a human would be at that distance, walking across the treeing, not coming into the camp, but walking past it. Its arms looked like they were dragging on the ground, and it looked like it had this long snout coming from its face. Its eyes were reflecting the light from the RV across the way, making its eyes glow a scary red color. It also looked to have these huge antlers on its head moving almost in a smooth way. Smooth as to where it looked unnatural, like it was kind of floating there. Finally, my dad started shouting for the dogs to shut up and open the side of the tent that connected the dog's tent, causing the dogs to run into the main tent. The creature seemed to not react to the commotion, but did turn to walk back into the woods away from our area. As it moved away, the dogs started calming down and stopped barking and growling like nothing happened. It took me 5 minutes to feel my heart stop beating out of my chest. My dad called to ask if I was okay, and I said yes and went back inside, but I couldn't sleep at all that night. In the morning during breakfast, I told everyone what I had seen, but no one believed me. My grandpa said I was probably seeing things from how tired I was, or it was a deer in the dark, and I just mistook how it looked. After breakfast, me and the kids my age went to the tree line where I saw the creature a few hours before. The area I saw it walking had hoof prints in the dirt and some signs of something dragging. Farther into the woods, there was this one tree that had these huge, deep lashes on it that was obviously fresh and unnatural. My grandpa said it was probably a deer rubbing its antlers on the tree, but it seemed like deeper cuts and gashes than a deer would cause. I refused to use the bathroom at night after that, and struggled to sleep even more. 2 days later, me and my friends wanted to see if there were any other signs that something had been out there, and we convinced Grandpa to come with us. We walked farther into the forest to the tree with the marks, and we showed my grandpa the marks, but the tracks on the ground had faded. Grandpa said it looked like a coyote had dug its claws into the tree. As we walked deeper and it got darker, my grandpa told us to wait and stay where we were and continued forward on his own. After 5 minutes, he came back and said we were going back to camp. After returning, he told us he found 2 more trees, marked the same way as the first one we had showed him, and a dead fox. He said the strangest thing was the fox wasn't eaten or anything, but it had been marked like the trees. He said it was probably a coyote who got into a fight and ended up leaving it. That's when I knew what I saw was real. After that, I refused to sleep in the tent, and I slept on the couch in my grandparents' RV for the rest of the trip. We no longer camp in that site, and a couple was actually found dead there 3 weeks later. In summer of 2019, my boyfriend and I decided to take a road trip to Vancouver, Canada, and then stay at the Golden Ears Provincial Park. We liked camping, had spring break, and wanted to do something different to make the most of our vacation. My boyfriend had never been out of the U.S., and it seemed like a crazy new experience. It was a 6-day trip with Airbnbs in each state, and the grand finale was a reserved campsite at Golden Ears, and it was close to the water. We packed terribly, had a giant tent, brought a bunch of fruit and vegetables to stay healthy, stored them in a cooler that was too small, and brought a cutting board and knife to break up the snacks while driving. We started in California, switching off driving. We drove through Oregon and Washington and made it to Vancouver. We spent a day or 2 in each state, drank a little too much, and stayed out late. Canada was the best part. We walked barefoot on the rocks with our toes in the freezing cold lake. We hiked around, saw a beautiful waterfall where we saw a couple taking pictures of each other for an hour, and we started modeling the same poses from far away. Everything was perfect, and the campsite was empty except for the other couple. We went to bed early that night. It was quiet, and I woke up to crackling outside of the tent. My boyfriend was still asleep and snoring. I didn't think much of it because it was pitch black and probably an animal. The crackling continued closer to the tent. I sat up and grabbed my phone. The brightness came on and I turned it off, almost blinding myself with the light. In those 2 seconds, I could make out a person right outside of our tent. I froze and sat up. They weren't moving and were close enough to unzip the tent. I started poking my boyfriend because I had no idea what to do. He woke up and I said someone was outside of the tent. Then I heard footsteps, quiet footsteps walking out of our campsite. My boyfriend started loudly saying, "What?" repeatedly in a sleepy haze. A car or truck was parked right outside of our camping area. No one was near our campsite before bed, and the vehicle started up and then drove off. They didn't turn on their lights until they turned the corner and were out of view, so I couldn't make out much, but it looked like a truck. Now, I was shaking, and my boyfriend was putting together what had happened. I wanted to leave, but the park locks the gate until 6 or 7 a.m., and it was 1 a.m., so we were stuck there. I made us move and sleep in the tightly packed car. Could it have been a park ranger? It seemed too weird of a behavior for a park ranger. I sat there wide awake for about 2 hours. The car was locked and I wanted to sleep, but I couldn't. I was in the passenger seat, my boyfriend in the driver's seat, and it was 3 a.m. I was sitting half awake and I heard a car slowly drive up the road, lights off as it rounded the corner. It had to be the same truck, and I was scared, but my adrenaline was pumping. It slowly rounded the corner and pulled up directly in front of our campsite again in the same spot. I was super scared. I had no weapon, but the kitchen knife we brought with for the fruits and vegetables. So I grabbed the knife and tried to make myself look angry, crazy, and big. I sat straight up in the passenger seat holding the kitchen knife. I kept it straight up at eye level and looked at this truck in the pitch black. The truck stopped and turned off. A light shined directly into my face coming from inside the truck, and I stayed back, terrified in the car, holding my large kitchen knife not blinking. The truck started up and turned on its lights, and they stayed on blinding me. The truck pulled out and then turned around and went back where it had come from. My heart was pounding, and I woke up my boyfriend and said that we needed to get out of the park. We packed up, just throwing things into the car, and sat there awake until 6 a.m. We drove home and didn't stop. We kept rehashing and trying to make sense of the situation, but we couldn't. We ultimately decided that we both needed some sleep. When I was about 8 and my brother was 9, our dad had us actively involved in Boy Scouts. It was very common for us Boy Scouts at the end of each year to have a group camping trip. This particular year, we all camped on a local piece of farmland with a pond, and we were able to fish, roast marshmallows, and other typical Boy Scout stuff. There were about 10 adults and 20 kids under the age of 10. Eventually, we all decided to hit the hay. Each camper resigned to their respective tents. My dad, brother, and I all got cozy in our big blue tent and got ready for bed. Mind you, this was in the 2010s, and having any form of smartphone was still very new and in some ways a wealthy privilege. This was not the case for my family. My dad had a very basic flip phone at the time. At around 2 or 3 a.m., we were all abruptly awoken by the sound of what sounded like somebody unzipping the flap on our tent. When I initially awoke, I assumed it was my dad either grabbing something from our car, using the restroom, or another camp dad stopping by. As it turns out, it was not my dad, as I quickly saw him right next to me. The next thing I knew, an unknown woman was loudly whispering, asking if we had a cell phone she could use. At this point, I was so freaked out that I woke my dad up. He quickly asked what she wanted, and she asked for his phone. He gave her his phone, potentially thinking it could be a domestic violence situation or something like that, and she needed help. He told me he tried not to listen to her phone call because he did not want to snoop as to what was going on, but he recalls her mentioning one thing he couldn't really avoid. She was on the phone and mentioned how she had just escaped from the back of a police cruiser and needed a place to hide out. This woman was on the run and currently using my dad's phone to call her escape route. Crazy stuff. And we still call our dad an accomplice, and he always laughs. After she had left, my dad immediately called the law enforcement and told them. They didn't even realize that she had escaped the police car and thought that she was still there. Anyways, my dad let her go because he was worried about the safety of the kids present, but they ended up catching her again later and coming back to our campground to let us know. The funniest bit was that my dad recalls her holding his phone weird while she used it. Reminder, we were on unused farmland in the middle of the night, and it was pitch black. We realized later this woman was in handcuffs the whole time, and he just thought she was holding her hands weird. My dad handed a woman on the run in handcuffs his cell phone so that she could call somebody to help her escape. In the moment, terrifying. But now it's a hilarious story of how my dad tried to help a lady and accidentally chose the wrong one to help. My friends and I liked to go camping a lot on weekends in high school. We are from New York and often went on camping trips to local upstate campgrounds. When we were seniors, 4 of us went to a campsite fitted with rows of cabins on the water that people could rent. As the sun went down, us girls noticed that our neighbors a few cabins down. A group of guys similar in age were playing music and grooving around the campfire drinking beers. One of the guys asked us all if we wanted to join. We got over there and started hanging with the guys. Everything seemed completely normal, and we were having a fun time. As the night progressed, one of the guys started to get blackout drunk and eventually pulled out a revolver and said it belonged to his dad. He started waving it around and playing with it. This obviously freaked everyone out, his own friends included. Eventually, he started pointing the gun to his head and laughing while his friends were yelling at him to put it away and how it wasn't funny. Us girls at that point were pretty disturbed and told the guys that we should be getting back to our cabin, and we said our goodbyes. When we got back to our cabin, we all talked about how freaky that was and expressed concern for the drunk guy. We then moved on to other topics of conversation and forgot about it for the time being. A few hours later, sometime in the middle of the night, we heard a loud bang coming from the direction of our neighbor's cabin. Shortly after this, a squad of cop cars showed up to the scene. One officer came to our cabin and started asking questions about the cabin we had visited earlier that night. When my friend asked the officer what happened, He explained that the kid had shot himself in the head in front of his friends. We still have a bit of PTSD from this incident and rarely go camping anymore.